Did you know Bob Ross was in the Air Force? Just gonna paint a couple happy little birds right here. Okay, it's time to mount this axle, and then we're gonna put on the hubs and the drum brakes, and then flip this over and put on the tires. I actually still need to paint the shock tabs on this axle, and I might do that real quick while I'm getting all this stuff set up so it has time to dry. Oh, little lizard. Psst. I used to wake up in the mornings and watch Bob Ross paint on TV. Not that this makes me feel like Bob Ross, but, you know, as close as I can get, I guess. Did you know Bob Ross was in the Air Force? I think a lot of people know that. Random little fact about Bob Ross. Just gonna paint a couple happy little birds right here. Not too worried about making it pretty. Worried about avoiding corrosion. As Bob Ross would say, just beat the devil out of that brush.
I will shake it off and then just beat the devil out of it.
All right, let's tighten all this stuff down, huh? So let me show you something real quick before I tighten all these down. The way these bolts are designed, they have these like knurled spikes or ribs on them. So you tighten them down from the nut side, and that knurled spike eats into the metal to help keep the bolt from rotating out. And then also, the threads are peened on the nut itself, so it's less likely to back off. Holy smokes. So let's install this first hub. So on these hubs, you have your wires. You need to make sure you pull those out before you mount it to the hub mounting face. So there is a left and a right hand. There's a sticker right there and it's a right hand. So if this is flipped over, then this would be the right hand side. And this magnet is going to go towards the bottom of the trailer. So we're kind of building this upside down right now. I'm just going to go on just like that. And there's 4 nuts that go into the back. Okay, hub mounted. So now we'll move on to the bearings and the shoe that'll go on here. So So while I'm putting on my gloves, discuss the grease that I'm using. You want to find a type of grease that is well and resistant to water. So I got the Mobil 1 synthetic grease, and it's made for heavy duty trailers and boat trailers, and it says that it's resistant to water, but obviously if we encounter deep water crossings, you know, definitely got to check the hubs anyways. And one of the things that will be part of my trailer's regular package will be a grease gun with this grease in it. So if I do get nasty water intrusion, I don't lose my hubs on the trail. So, all right, so you're gonna get a bunch of this grease on your hand, and then you're gonna take this bearing. The bigger bearing is the inner bearing. That's the first one that's gonna go in. And then there's a seal that goes behind it, and then the smaller bearing is your outer bearing that'll go on the other side. So first bearing first, gonna get a bunch of grease on your hand, and then you're just gonna pack this grease into the bearing. So just gonna put a bunch of it on my hand like that. Probably enough. And we'll just pack it in there until it starts coming up through the top of the bearing. So you can kind of see how it's starting to kind of pop up out of the top of the roller bearings there. Just kind of keep packing it in there until it's nice and full of grease. Make sure there's no spots that we missed there. Okay. So that one's greased up good. Just gonna drop it inside here. And then while I got all this grease on me, I'm gonna go and do the small one as well. So I don't have to clean off my hands and then come back to it. So that one's greased up, we'll just put it right back down there. I'm just gonna scoop off as much of this as I can and put it back into the can here. You have a seal. And the seal, I mean, it's gonna seal the bearing in from the back side. It's right in the name, huh? You can place that right in there. Actually, I like my gloves cleaned off decently well here. Don't worry about pulling those gloves off. Okay. So, they make tools to go over these bearing seals. I don't have one, so I'm going to use a little piece of wood so it taps it down evenly, and then just carefully just tap it into place. All right, got that seal down there flush. Go ahead and flip this over. I'm going to go ahead and grease the inside of this in here. Once I'm done installing this, I'm going to pack some of this grease into the grease gun and grease it up through the little Zerk fitting. Make sure there's plenty of grease in there. I actually didn't know that I got an easy lube axle when I bought it, so I was pleasantly surprised. Whoops. Okay, just want to make sure that the hub's mounting surface is clean. It's kind of cool. You get the Zerk fitting right here, and there's like a little hole at the back of the hub right there where it's gonna let that grease come out when you plug the grease gun into it. Easy lube axles are the way to go. If you're gonna build a setup like this with a solid axle, I highly recommend getting an easy lube axle. Okay. So now this is just gonna go right on here. Just wanna be careful not to push that bearing out. Bearing doesn't wanna slide on there. Well, I don't know where my larger adjustable wrench went, but I do need to go to the store today, so I'm actually probably just going to buy a hub nut large enough for that. That'll just also stay with the trailer in case I need it. But it's on there now. I'm going to go and put the cotter pin in there. I'll show you. This dust cap will just go right over the top of this right there. And then when you need to service this by pumping grease in there, you just pull this little like seal off, right? Which I'm gonna do from the back just for simplicity right now, but you just pull that off, and then you can put a grease gun on that Zerk fitting and just pump it full of grease. And you just grease it up until you start to see the grease come out and fill up this area right here. And it's filled in that whole void, and that's good to go. So, okay, so the axle's mounted and the hubs are mounted. I'm gonna do the other side, and then the next step will be flipping this over and putting the tires on it. It can't really be properly set without the tires on it, because we gotta kind of rotate it and set a drag spot, right? So the way that you set this is, I mean, you need to be able to access where the cotter hole pin goes. But you tighten this down to a point where there's like, you find the drag, right? When the tire's on there. And once you start to feel that drag, like that resistance, then you back it off just a little bit and put that cotter pin through so that this hub nut doesn't back off. So we can't properly set this just quite yet. Still gotta finish this out. Once that's done, then we'll pump this full of grease, put the dust cap on, and finish that process out. But we still got a little bit more work to do before we get there. China. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and put on the shocks now. The bolts and nuts that came with my shocks are not the same thread pitch as each other, so they won't thread into each other. I went to the hardware store, and tried to find the bolt that would match this nut, or the nut that would match this bolt. This is a 1/4 inch by 20 thread pattern, and this, I could not figure out what it was. I checked metric, I checked standard, and no idea. It was like somewhere between 1/4 inch by 20 and a 1/4 inch by 13. It was like somewhere in the middle between those two. I just couldn't figure it out. So instead of battling with this, I just got a bunch of 1/4 inch by 13 and just replaced all the hardware for that. So now I have nuts and bolts that will fit. So we're gonna go and put those on. I don't know if particularly there's a right side or upside down here, but I'm gonna put it like this so that if water gets into this, it drains out on its own. That's just my plan. Hey, this thing's heavy. All right, gotta move these sawhorses in so there's room for these tires. But I do think that axle over was the right decision for these, because there just wouldn't be a lot of room for articulation on the leaf springs if the axle was on top of the leaf springs. I've been kind of second guessing myself on that decision, but now that I'm kind of seeing it all together, I think that was the right call, because those leaf springs need room to smush. Tires are on. However, see that? Not enough of a gap. So I'm gonna have to take these back off, and I'm gonna have to get wheel spacers on these. It's just not enough clearance. Look at that. That's almost a trailer. So I'm gonna order some wheel spacers. While we're waiting on that, we can start on the wiring, I guess. It's the next logical step.